Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Self Storage Insight Podcast. And in today's episode, we are going to talk about insurance for your facility and making sure you have the right coverage to protect your business from any unforeseen circumstance that may arise. And so Terry Campbell is going to join me today to talk about insurance and making sure your business is protected. Welcome to another episode of the Self Storage Insight Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Terry Campbell. And Terry, if you don't mind, give us a little bit of your background and how you got in storage, and then maybe more specifically how you got involved with the Johnson Insurance Group.
Sure. I've been in the self-storage industry just a little over 30 years. Many years ago, I was a drafter. Over 30 years ago, I was a drafter. And I did a little part-time work for Betco, the self-storage building manufacturer. And the way I got involved is when I was learning AutoCAD back then. The guy who taught it at the local community college worked at Betco, and he was setting up their AutoCAD systems. And we got to be friends. He needed some help. I started working there a little bit part-time, and before you know it, I ended up there full-time and kind of grew from there. I was there 20 years. Then I left there to go to Live Oak Bank to start their lending team. Was there 7 years. Then I was at Copper for almost 2 years. And then I tried to retire, and that just didn't work. And I got in with Johnson Insurance. Johnson is they're a self-storage. They're an independent insurance agency in Mocksville, North Carolina. That's my hometown. There's obviously ties there. You know, I know some of the folks there. And long story short, they've been wanting to get into insuring self-storage facilities. And we started talking. They were asking questions. The next thing you know, I agreed to come on board and work with them on basically starting a vertical here like I did at Live Oak Bank, specific to self-storage. So that's
Awesome.
How we ended up here.
Yeah, so just kind of hitting the industry from every different angle, right?
Yeah.
You've been involved in about all of it. That's awesome. So 30 years or so, right, as far as involved in self-storage?
January 3rd was 30 years, so it's been just a tad over 30, and I've seen a lot of changes over those years. You know, I haven't worked at a lot of companies over that period of time, but I've seen a lot of changes, seen a lot of different perspectives. I'm also an investor, part owner in 11 locations. So I see it. I've got a lens for, each one of those things. I look through a different lens, and I can see it from the owner's perspective, as well as, having the building side, the finance side, the operations side. Just kind of can, have good visibility on it, good lenses on it.
For sure. And what was your, I guess, interest behind specifically going and working with the Johnson Insurance Group as far as to start a vertical for self-storage facilities, insurance policies?
Well, other than the fact that, there's a very good cultural fit there because that's where I grew up and I know a lot of the folks. They're very, very keen on customer service. I mean, they like to call it white glove service. And it is. It is a very high touch, and we're very concerned and on top of the customer service aspect. It's just over the years, I've seen a lack of customer service in a lot of segments of our industry, and I want to be part of a company. If I'm coming off of retirement, I want to come back in with a company that has a great reputation for the customer service. They didn't have a reputation for self-storage because they weren't in it yet, but their reputation, 97% customer retention rate says you're doing something right. So
Sure.
That's one of the big things. That's always been one of my, focuses is taking care of the customer.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, customer service and insurance isn't something that we normally put together in the same sentence there. So that's awesome to hear though, and to see what you're starting to do over there. And again, part of the reason why I wanted to have this conversation with you as well was, I mean, I've talked to so many storage facility owners that in the last 18 months have just been, their rates have tripled. There's nothing changed in their policy that they're aware of. They can't get any support on what's happening and where these price increases are coming from. And so I feel like there was definitely a hole in the market there that it seems like you're going after.
Yeah. And it's, speaking to that, those increases, we've all gotten them, not just in business or self-storage, but, your homes, your vehicles, everything. And just real quickly on that, the reasons are that the insurance industry is regulated like banking. You've got to keep a certain amount of cash reserves at all times. And some of the payouts that have happened over the last few years, because of catastrophic events, whether it's hurricanes or tornadoes or wildfires or whatever, it's really drained those cash reserves and the insurance companies. So there's only one way they can build those cash reserves back up to meet the
Right.
requirements of the government. And what is that? That's through increase in premium.
Hmm.
It's the only way they can do it. And
For
that's
sure.
what's happened. That's in a nutshell. That's the majority of what happened. Other than the fact that everything costs more now, vehicles have so many pieces and parts in it. Technology and things that cost so much more to repair if there's an accident versus maybe 10 years ago. So
Right.
all these things sort of accumulate. That's caused it to go up.
Absolutely. Yeah, and then on the medical side of it, if your insurance policy is covering anything medically behind that, those
Right.
costs have risen significantly. So yeah, I mean, as with anything, I mean, we all anticipate there's going to be some price increases with inflation and that sort of thing. But yeah, when most specifically when I was talking to storage facility owners, a lot of people don't realize that like catastrophic events that happen outside of their state of coverage actually affect their coverage if their policy is with a company that does business in multiple states. But it seems like that is what's happening.
Yeah, it sure is. I mean, that risk. I mean, insurance is about mitigating risk, and you're sharing that risk. So, the folks that they're definitely paying more when they live at the coast, but the people inland are going to pay more as well because the folks in those areas can't absorb the real numbers. So it's all shared across everyone. We all have to pay a piece of that when there's increases.
For sure. For sure. So kind of just diving into some questions here that I had around self-storage with the insurance side of the business. What are some of the biggest risks that self-storage facility owners are trying to mitigate with their insurance policy, or maybe some things to make sure that are covered on your policy that some people may not be aware of?
Well, one of the things that we're seeing as far as a risk that's been happening is people are really uninsured. When I say, well, I should say underinsured, not uninsured. They're underinsured. They don't realize it in a lot of cases that they're not. We've seen some recently that were underinsured by seven figures, and they didn't realize it. They didn't know it. I mean, you've had cost increases go up so much over the last few years. Back in 21, 22, steel prices, the buildings went up so much.
Mhm.
And sometimes people are still going with old coverages they used to have, and there's in no way, shape, or form an amount that's covering their facility that will replace it. They're
Right.
going to have a really big shock, and um, that's one of the biggest things we're seeing is that people just aren't insured properly. And one of the things that we hear a lot is the replacement cost. I feel like the replacement cost is too high, and I get what they're saying, and I would feel the same way if they're saying, look, I can rebuild this building for $25 a square foot or $30 a square foot or whatever, and I have to agree that for materials and labor that may be the case. If you just went and ordered it and built one today, but if you get into a situation where there has been a catastrophic event and there's a lot of buildings and damage, physical damage, you're going to have a situation where all your cost for materials and labor, there may be a shortage on material because of supply chains trying to get all those, buildings, all those areas fixed and corrected and rebuilt,
For sure.
and labor. It's going to be a shortage of labor to do this. So your prices are going to go, they may double or triple.
Mhm.
So that's what the insurance carriers look at, because if they don't insure it for an amount that would actually take care of your situation, they could potentially be sued for
Mhm.
errors and omissions. So there's a balance there. You don't want to pay. You want to push back on the cost, but if you're not properly insured, you end up with a horrible mess if you don't have the proper insurance levels to cover it.
For
And
sure.
then you may even say, "Oh, I'm going to sue the insurance companies because they didn't properly make sure I was properly covered." It's
Mhm.
always push back and forth on that.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, to your point as well there is so much influx or fluctuation, I should say, between material costs over any given 12-month period even. And I mean, I think everybody saw that significantly through COVID, and building prices doubled and tripled for a year, and then they slowly came back down, but material costs went through the roof.
Yep.
How much additional coverage should somebody be carrying? Is there like a certain percentage we'd be looking for to carry to protect ourselves from that fluctuation in materials and things? Like, is there a number that you normally recommend there?
Well, there's not necessarily a number that you can put on it. We always recommend that you review it at least once a year just to make sure that you're properly covered. If you're hearing about big increases in steel or big increases in building costs, you might want to review it more often than 1 year. So just making sure that you have these conversations, that if you think prices have gone up, you need to talk about it and see what the carriers have programs online that they can use and see this is roughly what the replacement cost could be, and a lot of times it's based on payouts of claims. So you want to make sure that you're meeting their minimum criteria, but also has something happen to cause the replacement cost to go up. So you can look at it like that, and some policies have an automatic percentage of increase that's added every year. But you never, it's so volatile, it's almost impossible to say, put this certain amount in and you're good. Just always
Right.
try to stay up to date on it.
Yeah. Well, my perception normally around insurance, and again, I probably would align with a lot of business owners, is like I would love a set it and forget it type of experience.
Yeah,
And so, for one, yeah, as far as even with like personal things, as far as reviewing my insurance with my agent or with the company that I'm with, I don't even necessarily know who that is, right? Or who I'm getting a hold of. So you're saying that you need to have a little bit of a better relationship with your insurance provider there. That way you can have those conversations.
right.
And the problem again for me has been for all these years is that like, yeah, I don't want to talk to my insurance company. I don't want to sit on hold for 45 minutes to get somebody on the phone to have that conversation. And so that's where I feel like what you're working on. And if you're putting a premium on the support side of insurance, that will be a huge factor for most business owners.
That's right.
But yeah, again, for me, it's more of a, yeah, I really, I try to forget about insurance,
Now
which is it's kind of why the policy's there. So you don't have to worry about it. But at the same time, yeah, you definitely need to stay on top of it.
especially these days, you really want to have those conversations and make sure that you are properly covered.
Now you were mentioning earlier there that you can go online and then you can look at what a rebuild would possibly cost. Is that something that you guys have on your website, or is there somewhere that somebody could go to check that out?
Now, usually, honestly, I don't know what they are. I know that the carriers that we go to get pricing for our customers, they have access to that. I'm sure there's some things out there. I just don't particularly know what they are, because when we go to get a quote, we'll go out and quote it to 6 or 8 different carriers, and they have that access. They probably have a
Right.
subscription or something like that, but I don't know how it works. I just know they have access to it.
Yeah. So in order for somebody to get that estimate from you guys, they would have to reach out to you guys specifically, and you would be able to get that pricing for them.
Yeah, whenever we put it out to bids to get them quotes, we can
Okay.
find out.
And then whenever you're talking to a new business about adding coverage or where the right amount of how do you determine the right amount of coverage for specific businesses? Does it vary a lot based on the market that they're in? As far as if they're in a tertial market, the policies are significantly different than in more of a metropolitan area, or how do you normally determine the right amount of coverage or the right type of coverage?
Yeah, sometimes, like you said, location has a big factor, because number one, replacement cost in the larger MSAs are going to usually be higher. So it is going to be more expensive. But there's usually a set. You don't usually want less than $1 million worth of general liability, and maybe you want an umbrella coverage. What's your exposure? What's your willingness to have some, absorb some of that risk yourself as well.
Okay. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And so there's not just mainly a cookie cutter experience for most places. One question I did have around that was a lot of people I talk to, they're looking to improve their facility, and so as far as improvements that are added. So let's say I have an unfenced facility that's not gated, no security cameras. How much do those type of improvements? So if I fence my facility and then I add a gate and security cameras, how much does that affect my actual insurance policy?
It's going to be very helpful. For one reason, some carriers won't even cover it if you don't have a fence and a gate. Cameras are just icing on the cake, but the fence and the gate is a non-starter for some of them. So number one, it'll give you more options to be able to choose from, and potentially better, but definitely better pricing if you've got those things.
Okay. For sure. So yeah, just additional things to be keeping in mind with your storage facility as you're planning out your upgrades that you're going to do. A lot of those things have an impact on multiple different areas in your expenses for sure.
Right.
So whenever you say Johnson Insurance Group focuses on customer service, what does that actually look like for a facility owner that is using you guys as their provider?
I think two of the biggest things, and this has been two of my rules forever. Two of the biggest things that they seem a little surprised by for some reason is I always up front I want to have a conversation. I don't. I mean, we allow folks to be able to access the application online to start the process, but they can't finish it because I want to have a conversation. I want to have a conversation that sets expectations so that they know what to expect in the process. They know how long it's going to take. They know why we need certain information. So having that conversation to set expectations and then communication all along. Those are two of the biggest things that I always live by, we live by, and a lot of people seem to be surprised by. And it's amazing to me that people are surprised by those facts. That
Hmm.
sometimes they've told me, look, we just went online, we did an application, we never actually spoke to anybody. We had a couple of emails back and forth, and that's it. I can't do that. I've got to speak to these folks and make sure we're on the same page, make sure that I understand what they expect, make sure they understand what we expect, and how the
Hmm.
process works. And especially when you're talking about working with an independent insurance agency, because one of the misconceptions that is out there that I like to share with folks, I consider this customer service, is sharing with them how the process works with an independent agency because folks always think, and again, what I'm about to say is counterintuitive. They think if I've got two or three insurance agencies working against each other, it's going to help me. It's just the opposite of that because as an insurance independent agency, we're all able to get quotes from the same carriers who are actually the one insuring their property and insuring them for their liability.
Hmm.
If there's multiple of us out there, those carriers only give one quote and that's it. Whoever comes to them first gets that quote. None of the other agencies can get it. So if there's two or three agencies working and there's let's just say six carriers out there and each of us get two, we have those two to work with. Now,
Okay.
if we're the one handling the whole process and representing that customer with all of them, then we have the leverage between to work with all those carriers to try to get them the best deal. You
Sure.
can't you can't do that if you're diluting it. And if your agency is not providing the service and not communicating with you, you should fire them anyway. But you don't really want more than one agency working on it because you're wasting their time. You're putting yourself in a position you may not get the best opportunity as far as pricing and coverage. So
Right.
those are the things that kind of set us apart. And I don't necessarily will come out and say that, hey, if you're working with another agency, we're not going to work with you. I want to know who they're getting quotes from, and then we can make a determination. But I try to be upfront about that and honest in how that's in their benefit to do that. So there's a lot of different things that we have in play that we consider, the customer service we provide for our customers.
For sure. Yeah, and I think most people wouldn't have realized that's how that works. And it always seems like the competition level would happen at the insurance, the insurance provider that you reach out to, not necessarily at the next level of the bank that's actually covering the policy
Right?
or however that would
Right.
that would work there. So yeah.
You don't want your agencies competing against each other. You want the carriers competing against each other because they're the ones that can do something. We can't do a thing about the price uh,
Mhm.
at all. They're the ones that can do something about the price.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Good information. And yeah, great to know for anybody that's out there looking for a policy. As far as with kind of the change in technology and everything happens more online, right? Everybody's just more accustomed to if you can do it on an app or you can do it on a website, it's the personal touch of things has gone significantly away. It feels like over, the last 10 years or so, probably over the last 20 years. Um, do you find that that's kind of a barrier to boarding new facilities or talking to people is that you deal with people that don't want to talk to anybody, they want to do everything online and not have that conversation?
So far, I haven't. I mean, I know there are a lot of folks out there that would rather just do everything without actually speaking with someone or talking with someone. But I'm finding that, especially with insurance, because of the cost these days and how much it's gone up and how important it is, people are willing to have a conversation. We still do a lot online ourselves, and we have a lot of technology, and we use some AI and things like that. But sprinkling in that phone call in there with them up front. So far, nobody's had an issue with it. In fact, some of them are like, "Well, I'm glad that you're willing to get on a call instead of making me do everything online without speaking to somebody." So
Yeah.
far, so good. We haven't had any kind of problem with that, with nobody, somebody not wanting to work with us because of that.
Okay. Yeah, and what I found too, as far as from working in the self-storage industry, is that most of the complaints that I hear from customers that we work with that are frustrated with whatever their experience is, the frustration is more around being ghosted and not being able to have those conversations, or not having a phone number to call, and everything needs to happen online. And so I think, at least for most of the companies that we're working with, they do appreciate that, the one-on-one conversations, and more of the phone support, and the personal touch that comes with that, versus a lot of industries, a lot of different demographics of people, I feel like, tend to go the other way, and they want a chat bot that they can text, and that sort of thing. So in
Right.
self-storage, I haven't seen that as much.
Right. No, we learned, at Copper, that you're taking the person out of the office, but you're just putting them on the other end of a phone. As long as somebody can speak to someone, in a lot of cases, that's what makes the difference. As long as they actually can, if they need to, or if they want to, as long as they have the ability to do that. And like I said, I kind of push it, and I don't think we've done a single policy, or worked with a single person yet that we didn't have at least a quick phone call with.
Awesome. Now, is there one piece of advice or one thing you would tell somebody who's looking to, maybe they're building a facility or buying a facility, and they're going to be setting up their first insurance policy for their business? Is there like one piece of advice you'd give to that person to say, hey, regardless of who you're working with, make sure you check this box?
I would just make sure that they've got all of their requirements from their lender, from their management company, that they know that, and that they work with their agency to be sure that they've got coverage in place, that if something happened, that they don't lose their business, or they don't ruin themselves. It's don't skimp. I know, people want to pay as little as they can, but don't skimp on replacement costs. Don't leave out things like customer goods liability or sale and disposal, because things like sale and disposal sound like, "Oh, I'll never need that. That's never an issue." Well, when you do, you'll wish you had it, and it's really not that expensive, because things like that can really hurt you.
For sure. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, great advice, and yeah, it's been a lot of fun talking to you and picking your brain a little bit around insurance. And again, it's something I'm not super familiar with. It's definitely not something that I put a lot of time into learning about, but it's definitely good to know. Let me ask you this question, and this isn't something I had sent over as far as for you to be prepared on. As far as with your years in storage, you've been in the industry for a really long time, and you're invested in facilities. Have you ran into any crazy experiences, or anything that you'd like to share with the audience of something that happened in self storage that was just outside of the norm in your mind?
Oh Lord, um, there's so many just weird things. I can't think of anything specific that would really jump out. I mean, we've seen, obviously, meth labs. You've seen, um, um, I don't know if you want to edit this out when it comes time, but prostitution rings that use these things because they're cheaper than a hotel room.
Hmm.
We've seen, garage bands, just all sorts of things. I've seen guys that would rent a climate control unit that had a light in it, so they could unscrew the light, put in an adapter, and have a plug for a small TV and a small fridge, because their wife wouldn't let them watch football at home. So they would go out on Sunday afternoon, go to their unit and watch TV and drink a beer.
Hmm.
Some of those things like that. But there've been dead bodies found. There's just all sorts of things that have happened
Yeah.
out there.
It's definitely, yeah, I've heard some wild stories and stuff. I always just like to ask, but yeah, be prepared for anything, because you have no idea what people are going to come up with when they get a small space to do something in it.
Yeah,
Is usually the
crazy,
consensus.
and some folks just get out of hand. I remember one just popped in my mind. We had a situation that was a divorce, and the unit was in the wife's name, and the husband just insisted he get into that unit, and they wouldn't let him in. They wouldn't let him on the property because his name wasn't on the lease, and she said, "Do not let him in."
Hmm.
Well, He came flying down the drive and crashed through the gate. I mean, he actually knocked the gate down to get
Yeah.
in to go to the unit. Obviously, he got arrested and had to pay for all these things. But, just
Yeah,
there's lots of things have happened over the years.
for sure. Awesome. Well, Terry, it's been awesome having you on the show and learning a little bit more about your insurance the insurance group that you're working with there. And if you don't mind, can you give us what's the best way to get a hold of you if somebody has specific questions and they want to reach out to you directly?
I think the best way is just to shoot me an email. It's Terry, Terry, at gojohnsonins.com. And, or you could always look us up, Johnson Insurance Services online, but Terry at gojohnsonins.com is the best way to do it.
Thank you guys so much for listening and tuning into the podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If this episode was brought to you by CC Storage. CC Storage is a property management software that can be utilized by your business at no cost to you. Pass the fees for credit card processing onto your tenants, increase your business's revenue, no software fees, no contracts, no per unit costs, no surprises. So hope you check out CC Storage as the sponsor of our podcast, and we hope you tune in to the next episode. Thank you.